Voices in Action, Real-Time Insights Roundtable. And the dynamic of this session is that we're actually going to pose real comments from customers and employees about different situations that happen at the dealerships and the actual feedback they give in the surveys. And we have here present our panelists, which I will introduce in a second, and they will just share some of their perspective, if maybe it has happened to them, what they did, or just insights in general. So while we get some more people joining, I will introduce our speakers. Thank you very much for being here. So first we have Audra. She is the Marketing Relations Manager at Berry Companies. And she's been with Berry for about 3 years, and we love working with her. She is highly effective at managing multiple projects and collaborating strategically with all levels of an organization, both locally and globally. She thrives in building relationships that are mutually beneficial and long-lasting, and enjoys the challenge of the job that is not the same day in and day out. Audra, thank you so much for being here. Next, we have Don. Don is the Executive VP Sales at Miller Brantford and Riceburg. They are a heavy construction equipment dealership with 7 locations, and they provide sales, rental service, and parts for manufacturers such as Case, Sandvik, Bunkman, and more. He's been at MBR full-time for 29 years in various roles, both outside sales and management. And they are second-generation family business and has worked in all areas of the company since he was 14, except in the account department. He has a business management degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dan, thanks for joining.
Good morning.
And last but not least, we have Paul. Paul is the Senior Customer Experience Manager at Hudson Inc. with over 10 years working there. Hudson Inc. is a 32 location dealership across Michigan, Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee. And regardless of the name of the building, his career has been about building up people, leadership, development, empowering, communicating, and especially encouraging. That's what he does. He creates the atmosphere, and then he gets out of the way. Paul, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. I do want to give a note for the Q&A. If throughout the conversation you have specific challenges that you want the speaker's perspective on it, please go ahead and put it in the chat or in the Q&A section so that we can address them at the end. And with that, Ryan, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Alina. Thanks, Audra, Dan, and Paul for joining. We kind of thought this concept of putting these real life questions out there, or these real life comments, excuse me, that we've gotten back, and put everybody in the hot seat to say like, hey, how would you deal with these things in your organization? We've, of course, went through and kind of desensitized where there were any names or anything like that. So no one's going to be identified or anything. So if you hear one of your comments, once again, no one knows where it's coming from. And really what our goal for this session is just to help people that are on the call think through solving problems, right? Like, so we get these challenges, we get this feedback, whether it's customer feedback or employee feedback. And sometimes we have to sit there for a little while and think like, my gosh, like, how do I deal with this one to align with our culture, to align with our strategy, to align with everything that we're doing, and still continue to set the right example for our team, set the right example for our customers, and continue to grow and be successful in the business. So that's a long-winded way of saying there is no right answer. I'm putting you guys all in the hot seat right now, to kind of think through these. And so, if there's nothing, if it doesn't resonate with you, by all means, don't worry about having to answer it. But if you have an idea or a part of a response, just throw it in there. All right. What I also am going to do is I'm going to go back and forth between what we're calling voice of customer survey comments and voice of employee comments. Now, all of you guys are in different roles and have been in different roles in your organizations over the years. It doesn't have to be a technical HR response to something if it's an employee thing. I think we've all heard comments from staff where we've been like, oh my gosh, that really didn't happen. Or when we read the voice of employee comment, if you've dealt with something similar in your organization, which I'm sure you have, or you've seen it dealt with, chime in and let us know. Once again, you're not required to answer all these by any means. So let's start with our first voice of customer comment. I've been a longtime customer. My recent request for service took over 3 weeks, and the list of repairs requested was not completely done. The service department should strive to update repairs with customers via phone, text, etc. Anybody ever hear something like that in their organization?
Yep.
Dan, you want to hit it?
Well, we take these surveys very seriously, and we've been with you guys. I've lost track of time, probably pushing 20 years. And this is back to one of Ryan's words, culture. This is a culture in our company. Every single one of these survey answers gets sent to the president of our company, who also happens to be my brother. And if something like this comes across his desk, it doesn't take more than probably 30 minutes, unless he's tied up in a meeting, to have the people that are tasked with figuring out what's going on here to get engaged. Now, I will say this, sometimes the customers do embellish. Sometimes the customer point of view is not correct. So you do have to flesh that out. But I'm not saying that the customer is wrong, but don't draw conclusions immediately. You need to do some fact finding as a manager to vet out what is being said. But it's very important to address these issues, because if they don't, they will bubble over. And maybe it's a training issue. Maybe we have a new employee that didn't understand, or we didn't onboard properly and explain what your tasks are. And the only way we're going to correct it is to hit it right in the head. And these are not meant as a carrot or a stick with our employees. It's meant to be, how do we do things better? How do we improve? So it's like I said, it's not a weapon that we use against our staff, but you have to know when our people do fall down on the job, and they will. They're human.
That's great, Dan. So let's take this specific example. How do you think something like this, where the person comes in, says, hey, it took 3 weeks, with list of repair wasn't done, you should have updated me. Just from a process management perspective, how do you think that this would be approached?
Well, I think likewise, you got to, the process would be the manager of this, because it sounds like it's a part situation or a service department situation. Sometimes our vendors do fall down on the job and they can't produce the stuff. Well, because they tell you 3 weeks, it doesn't mean you take 3 weeks to tell the customer it's 3 weeks. You have to communicate with the customer, and then likewise find other solutions. Could we rob a part? Could we give them a loaner unit? There's other options that they need to explore, rather than just saying this is a black and white answer, and try to peel that onion back to find another solution for that customer.
Excellent, thank you. Paul or Audra, any thoughts? Nada? All right, cool. Let's move on to a voice of employee question. Let's see. Maybe give us a few sick days we can use instead of being pressured into using our vacation time when we are sick and miss a day. Extend the closed Saturdays for a little longer during off season. I know this is a business. We have to make some sacrifices to meet our customers' needs, but I feel like I'm married to this place and it gets old. Who wants that one? Paul, what do you think about that?
So what I challenged our group with is one of my favorite quotes is perception is reality. And to that employee, that may not be true. It may be the farthest thing from the truth, but that's what they feel. And so what I try to challenge our group with is to just look at it from the standpoint of that snapshot in time. That's what they're dealing with. And when you try to tell somebody that their emotions are wrong, well, my emotions aren't right or wrong, they're mine. And so what I try to challenge our group with is okay, put the process down, put the business down, put the guidelines and the ditches that you've got to operate in, and go have a conversation with that person one-on-one and find out where they're coming from. They might have something going on that doesn't have anything to do with the business, and they just need somebody to listen to them. And I think that's probably, whether it's on the customer side, the customer engagement, or the employee engagement, is that there's a story behind every comment. There's a story behind every survey. And if we're not careful, we can paint that with a really broad brush and miss what's important. And so, yeah, we all need more time off. I get that. That it is for sure. No matter where you work, we need more time off. But there's something going on there, and I like to call it the Paul Harvey. There's a Paul Harvey to every story. Not everybody knows who Paul Harvey is, but I'll shut up because I'm revealing my age.
Paul, at Hudson, how do you guys handle sick days?
It's very similar to what it sounds like here. We have AA days so you get your time off that's based on length of service. And with that, I call them vacation days, but that includes if I have to take a sick day, that comes out of that bank. It's so we don't have designated sick days and designated vacation days. It's all together, and it's challenging. From a company policy, it's challenging to be able to manage those. I work with my guys on my team where, just schedule your doctor's appointment toward the end of your shift and don't take a vacation day for it. But there's different ways around that we use.
Thank you. Audra, anything you want to add on that? Oh, you're muted, Audra, I think. Yep. Or we don't have your microphone enabled, maybe. Let's see. Are you muted? 1 second. No, you're not muted. So it sounds like it's maybe a microphone issue. Do you want to, if you click on the audio or the mute button down there, there's a little arrow to the right. It should allow you to select your microphone.
How about now?
Yeah, boom, you're gone. Great.
Perfect. Yeah, so here at Berry Companies, we don't have, unfortunately, haven't implemented the voice of the employee surveys yet across the board, but very similar to Paul, our sick time is basically paid time off. So you use it for sick or personal or whatever it might be. I remember there was one time one of the employees asked me, she's like, hey, I got to call my doctor because I really need to try and get in. Do I need to clock out? And I'm like, how long is this call gonna take? And she's like, oh, maybe like 15-20 minutes. I'm like, step into the conference room, make the call. So I don't know if it's coming from previous employers that weren't quite so, I don't want to say we're loose with it, because I don't feel like that's something that you really should have to clock out for a quick call to your doctor. But Berry Companies is all about that work-life balance, making sure employees can do what they need to do for their personal life, as long as it's not completely taking you away from the job when you need to be focusing on the job.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. You guys want to jump back up to voice of customer speed round? I'm just kidding. Not yet. All right. Here's a great comment. Partsman could not find my part on the computer, then sold me the wrong replacement. I returned the next day and the man in the repair shop located the part, but it was at another store. I drove there to make $106 purchase in all. I drove approximately 250 miles in 2 days in order to get the right item. I bet no one's ever heard anything like this in their dealership.
Never.
Who wants to grab this?
I can take this one. Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Go ahead, Audra.
You
And then
fight
Paul,
for it,
if
Paul?
you want to jump
No,
in
I don't want to
after.
fight.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with Berry Companies, but we have 9 different divisions in 9 different states with roughly 60 different locations. So just quick overview of how we're handling the surveys here. But all of the surveys every day get sent to me at 8:36 p.m. My phone goes crazy with all of our surveys. My kids and my husband now know when my phone's going crazy at that time. It's surveys. So every morning I come in and I go through them and I send them off to our division managers or presidents, our operations managers, and then the branch managers. And then some of the divisions I also copy on their sales managers if it's a sales survey, and maybe a local marketing contact. But so on something like this, I would forward it on to the appropriate branch, division and ops managers, which is say, hey, FYI, this customer is providing this comment. That is all that my part entails. So I send it on. If it's an issue, I'll say, hey, here's an issue. And we define issues as lower scores in overall or recommend. So if they get a 7 or below, then we consider that an issue because that's something we want to address. Or a kudo, if somebody's calling out one of our employees or the branch in general that, hey, you guys did amazing. So on this one, I would forward it on to them. Depending on the branch, we have a little bit different ways that they respond. Sometimes they respond and copy me in on it. And I know what's going on. Sometimes they take it offline, which is perfectly fine. Because once I forward it on, we say, I don't have to be involved unless you really want my help. So this, I would see our employees, first of all, the branch manager, ops managers would say, why are you not contacting one of our other 60 branches to see if there's a part and transferring it in for the employee or for the customer? So we would definitely try to look internally and get that going. But if we had failed that for this, I feel our branch managers would talk to that parts department employee and say, hey, what happened here, and get both sides of the story. Like Paul said, there's always two different ways. Sometimes it's not exactly the same as what the customer is presenting. And they'd follow up and hope make it right for the customer, either just reaching out, say, hey, we apologize that you went through this, or we all know customers love free hats. So on something like this, they might apologize and say, hey, come in, we'll give you a free hat. That tends to solve all the world's problems. It's crazy what people will forget for a free hat.
Thanks, Audra. Paul, did you have something you want to share?
Our processes are very similar on that. But I think that what I try to encourage our groups to understand is that everybody wants to blame everything on COVID, and so I want to make a comment about that. That our parts departments are a lot different. We hired a lot of parts people post COVID, and we've got a lot of guys that are brand new to the industry, and you lose somebody with 35 years experience looking up parts and try to replace them with somebody like me that doesn't know where the bathroom's at. The surveys and the comments that we get will verify that. And that what we try to do is, like we said earlier, we're not beating anybody up. It's a metric and it's a number, and we're gonna manage toward that. But once you satisfy that customer, and I'll make another comment real quick. Most of the comments when we call customers ask, they're just blown away that somebody, number one, read their survey, and number two, called them back. Most of the time when we call a customer and they're like, I cannot believe you called me back, and I can't remember what they were upset about. And so past that is being able to have the regional aftermarket managers that are over the locations to be able to take a fair assessment of, okay, did I earn this score? Is my customer experience, customer service in this location, does this survey verify that? If I've got a brand new parts person on the counter, then I would expect to see a survey that might reflect that. But now on the other side of it, if I've got a 35-year, if I got 3 guys on the parts counter that's got 35 years and I'm getting a survey like this, then it really is a different conversation that allows that regional aftermarket manager to come in and have a targeted conversation versus what the heck's going on in Paducah. And so kind of two sides to it. We'll take care of the customer, absolutely, but it's helping those aftermarket managers that are on the ground grow their locations and grow their people based off of what a customer said.
Thanks, Paul. Dan, anything you want to add on this one?
Yeah, just a small thing. I integrated something. I've coached youth sports for over a decade, and I call this, in sports, I call it a coachable moment. In business, I call it a teachable moment. These are teachable moments and you got to do it at the moment something is done that we've identified is an issue and is wrong. And if you explain it to the employee that this is a teachable moment, I'm trying to rectify a problem so it doesn't become a habit, they will embrace that. But
Yeah.
if you come unglued on them and lose your cool with them, then it doesn't become a teachable moment. It becomes a moment that they remember, well, I'm not liking this place and I don't feel comfortable with my job. And to Paul's point, so many of our staff is now under the age of 30, and many of these parts departments, they don't have the tribal knowledge that people did that have been here for 30, 35, 40 years. And we've got to understand that.
That's great. Thank you. And just quickly on that point, is there anything unique or interesting you guys are doing aside from standard training to help some of those parts counter people get up to speed? And the answer could be no, right? Now, or I just let it off the cuff if anyone's like, oh yeah, this is working great, or if it's just the tried and true. Hey, we have to train them. We have to put them through the processes. We have to teach them about where everything is.
I'd love to tell you we have that, but unfortunately, we're looking at it. We know we've got to change our tactics, but unfortunately, it's almost okay. Here's how you clock in and out. Now run fast, play hard, and call me if you need me. And that's a trial by fire. We're working toward that, but we haven't figured it out.
Yep. Great. All right. Let's see here. Let's go back to, or let's go down to a voice of employee. And one of the reasons why I picked this comment was we get a lot of feedback from employees that leadership's not doing a great job of communicating about decisions that are being made. And I know we all think, hey, we make the decision, we push it down, and that's it, and everybody just needs to execute. But organizations are getting ranked really low on the kind of that leadership understands what's going on and my input's important. And, I think we'll talk about some of that in the benchmark report. But this comment struck me. Communication is key, as I have seen to lost count of the many things that were not informed at our location. We have people in certain positions that make you feel obsolete and go behind your back. Management not holding employees accountable for their actions and allowing bad behavior to continue, and that's why you lose good people. Any thoughts about, kind of how would you handle if you were able to address this comment for an employee, or do you have any unique things that you're doing in your organizations to make sure that staff are being communicated to so that they're understand the decisions that are being made?
There's a lot of layers to that comment.
Yeah. We probably can't grab them all, but if there's one thing that kind of that hits you, let me know what you're thinking, Audra.
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts off with like communication is key. Making sure that leadership is communicating from the top down. A huge thing in this organization. So with Berry Companies right now, we're going through a new ERP implementation. So not survey related, but a pretty big project. And part of my other role here is as project manager for that. So I get to do marketing and projects, which is so much fun. And communication, a huge thing, because you got to do change management all the way from the top. So you're never going to be able to reach every employee how they necessarily want to be reached, but you got to try and reach them on 3 different points. So we are sending out emails, we're keeping it in our newsletters, what's going on. We have a monthly video that we do for this project where we have a video guy come in, takes 15 minutes to shoot. We've had everyone from Adam Berry, David Berry, John Berry, myself, everyone that's on the core team of the project is doing one of these videos, and we send it out in an email to all the employees. We put it on our intranet page called Berry Connect. And then another great thing on the communication, like just trying to figure out how the employees want to be communicated with. So some people love the videos, and we always try and put like a little Easter egg in there so that people want to watch it and see something fun, whether it's one of the guys playing with a toy excavator, or we had a remote control forklift that one of the guys used. So just trying to make it more fun. But some people, like it's parts counters, they don't have speakers, so they can't listen to the videos. So it's a matter of sending out an email where they can read the updates, or even with any project, like Walter Berry and all the C-suite will go out to the branches, try and get there at least once a year, sit down, talk to every single employee, not just branch managers. But they'll have like a little town hall and just talk and, make sure they're being communicating and felt heard. So you got to figure out where your employees want to get that communication, because I love the videos. I think they're fun. I would love to watch people being silly and giving updates, but not everyone's going to. So we have to figure out where to hit them and where their communication needs are met.
Thanks.
I won't touch on the other points on that comment. There's a lot. I won't hog the comment.
No, I appreciate it. Great insight. Dan or Paul, anything you on this one?
I had a question for Audra. So how often are the videos? Or did you say weekly or monthly or?
Monthly for this project? Yeah, we're doing it monthly. We have a really good videographer that'll come in, do the video, and turn it around in like 2 days for us. So this next one we aren't going to record for a couple more weeks because we're trying to get the next milestone hit, and then we'll send it out before end of March. So it's a monthly. We've been doing it for, I want to say, almost a year now on these video updates, if not a little bit longer. And
are they scripted? Are they targeted on the topic, or is it kind of impromptu?
Yes and no. So I have written out the script for every single one, but depending on who's doing the video, they will ad lib and put their own flair to it. Or I'll just give them the talking points and say, here's what we need to update. Say, we're going over service this week. We're doing this, and they'll kind of just ad lib and go off of it. And some people are like, I need it verbatim, written down. And we actually bought a teleprompter so that it's not somebody staring up and trying to read like that. You're like looking at the employees as they're listening to you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, Audra, thank you for sharing that. In these situations where I'm doing some post-employee survey debriefs with leadership teams, one of the things I tell them is, I'm like, you have to use a multimodal approach to communicate with staff today. You have people that consume information on their phone. You have people that consume information in paper. You have people that only will watch videos, right? Only people that will get texts. Like, you have to figure out what are all those different channels that'll reach all the different generations or people in your organizations to be able to make sure that you're communicating these messages. So I'm super excited to hear that you're doing those things, because I think it's critical. So thanks for sharing that. Anything else on this topic before we go on to the next one? Okay, this is actually a customer comment, which is interesting. It feels a little bit more like an employee comment, but so the customer comment was, we had a very uncomfortable encounter in the parts department with an employee. He was verbally inappropriate to one of our employees regarding a situation outside the workplace. He was highly unprofessional and made it uncomfortable for my employee to come back into the store and retrieve parts. So an example of, where a business is sending one of their staff to the dealership to get a part, and you have a parts counter person that's handling the situation inappropriately and making the person uncomfortable. How do you guys handle something like that?
Well, I would hope it would be in a branch where I have multiple people, and I'll just make sure that that person never has to interact with that person. Number one, and say, you can deal with this person here who you don't have an issue with. Likewise, that doesn't fix the situation, and remind people it would be interesting if they were in that situation outside of work, if they were wearing our type of swag, and you are projecting our image in the local marketplace when you're walking through the grocery store or through the local restaurant. Make sure that you are behaving appropriately, especially when you're wearing that type of stuff. That would be adding insult to injury on top of the fact. Just be professional in public, period, because you don't know who you're going to interact with.
Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you can just ignore the question, but I think the answer is probably most people don't. Do you have any training, or have you guys engaged in specific training about how to conduct yourself professionally and you know what I mean? Like, not necessarily sexual harassment training or things like that are maybe more standard and But like, is there anything about like, here's how to conduct yourself as a professional? Here's the right type of language to use. Here's things we do and don't do. Have you guys ever done anything like that?
We did some role playing a little while back pre-COVID, targeted actually with our part staff, where we would have quote unquote fictitious parts people call, and then we would actually video or audio the calls, and then if there was issues, we would go back and sit down with the employee and say, this was the actual call, this wasn't a real customer, it was a scripted call, this is how you acted, this is how you should have acted. So and there are other things that we've done to I'll use a phrase of one of our managers with our newer staff that doesn't know what we do, and we're trying to train them. We try to quote unquote put words in their mouth to try to help them stay on message.
That's great. Audra or Paul, anything you guys want to add on these type of situations where you have an inappropriate sort of engagement with a customer?
We're going back. We've done some soft skills training. This past summer, I went to the locations and just we're trying to go back and drill into what customer experience is and customer service. The difference between customer experience and customer service. We're really good at processes. We're really good at hiring people and putting them in and teaching them and putting the Hudson shirt on. But some of those soft skills, answering the phone with a smile and choosing your attitude and what affects your attitude, internal, external, what affects your effort. I really drilled this year. That's probably our goal this year. Our theme this year is that I can't control the way that a customer comes in and acts, but I can control the way that I respond or react. And so I control my attitude or my effort and my skill in relation to all of those things. I think in this particular case, though, and the way we would handle that, kind of like what Audra has said, when we process those surveys, it usually goes back to the location manager. On that particular one, it probably wouldn't go back to that location manager. I would start marking that up the chain and putting that into somebody with a title. And then that conversation with that customer would come from like a EVP or a VP to let them know that I'm not going to get into the weeds with you on the details of it, but I really want you to know I appreciate you letting us know, and this is important to us, and we're working through it and trying to fix that situation as opposed to putting it back to the location level and then igniting it again. That customer just needs to know that they're being heard. And lots of times on things like that, it's easier just to ignore it rather than just deal with it.
Thanks, Paul. And Paul, are you the one doing that training in the organization?
Yeah. So we did the first round of it, or the first time we did it was in 19 before COVID hit. And then with the acquisitions that we've had and the growth that we've had in the Michigan market, I know it's hard for you guys to believe, but my accent does give me away. I am in the South, and the Michigan locations know that, and so the cultures are different, and so part of that is the culture of Hudson and what we. This the difference in the geography. So this past summer we went back and did round one, and got another round coming. Hopefully this fall about going back and just teaching the basics.
That's awesome. Thanks. I remember you talking a little bit about that. Are you okay if people reach out to you as far as talking about what you're using for some of your training that you're doing specifically?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Audra, anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, Dan and Paul pretty much hit it. On that specific comment, I would, before I send the survey on to anyone, I would look up that transaction in our system and see who rang it up. Not saying that a branch manager would have done it, but every now and then they have to cover the counters. So I would just look it up to see who it was, and always copying the division president, the ops managers, and then in this case, depending on who rang it up, might change if it goes to the branch manager or not. But that's something we would make sure it's escalated so that they can determine how to handle it. Berry Companies does have a customer service training that they do for everyone. So we have somebody in HR that has gone to every single branch over the last year and a half. I don't know what her timing is, and goes through this. I believe it's a half day, maybe a full day, And she'll split it over a couple days, so we're not pulling the whole branch off, but she'll go through those soft skills, some of the de-escalation processes, service with a smile, and it's great. They didn't just do it for the branches, but everyone here at we aren't corporate, we're divisional support. Here at the divisional support office, we actually went through it as well. So even though we're not necessarily face to face with the customers, our customers are the divisions, and so we need to be able to treat them just as we would want them to treat their customers.
That's great. Thank you. We lost you on video, Paul. I don't know if that's intentional, but I'm going to read the next question here. We're going to go down to voice of employee, and this is a hot topic. And once again, I think we're going to cover this in some of our benchmark study reports. But the employee said, "If I have to read," well, let me preface this. Some of our questions on the survey say excluding a salary increase. So, answer this question. This comment question. Excluding an increase in salary as your answer to the question, right? So this respondent said, if I have to read, quote, excluding an increase in salary, quote, one more time, I'll lose it. It has been 3 years since my last increase in salary, and inflation has gone bananas since then. Our prices on parts and labor have increased, but not pay to employees. There are equivalent job postings for my position that have a starting pay higher than I currently make. It's getting a bit ridiculous. Now, I'm sure that none of you have heard anything similar to this over the last 3 to 5 years in your organization. Who wants to start with, have you heard stuff like this going on in your organizations, and how are you dealing with it? And ideally, what we want to try to do here is give the audience the tools of what things you're doing, how to combat, situations like this. So who wants to start with that one?
I don't.
I was gonna say you might skip me on this one. I don't have all the insight into the pays and other outside of our group. So
I would
Dan,
say
any experience?
if someone hasn't been given a raise in the past 3 years, either they're a very ineffectual employee and should have been shown the door, or I'd like to have them working in our area and we'll try to hire them away, because if you haven't given someone a raise in the past 3 years, I don't know how you are surviving right now. If you have employees that are quote unquote pulling the sled, that would be impossible for us to do right now. So
Talk to me about, go ahead.
if that was an actual, it was an actual comment, boy, if I was that employer, I'd be wondering, what are we doing?
Yeah, and just to be clear, these are all live, real comments. I pulled them directly out, anonymized them to make sure that they weren't referencing anybody, but I was shocked by that. And one of the main reasons I pulled that one out is, even though I think people are addressing these price increases, I still think we have a lot of staff out there that are feeling underpaid. And even at our conference last week, we're hearing that some of the competitive automotive dealerships and things like that are offering higher wages, and it's becoming challenging to retain some of these techs, especially. So
yeah, techs is a huge thing on the recruiting side, trying to get people in, trying to keep them. Only thing I'd say on this one is they're saying that, there's equivalent job postings for that position with higher pay. They already have a foot out the door. They're looking at job postings. So if you want to retain your employees, you got to give them a livable wage. You got to give them a wage that makes them want to stay. But it's not just the money, but you got to have a good culture to back it up. So if you're like really close to that wage gap, and your culture is awful, they're going to have both feet out the door. They're not going to stick around any longer. So definitely make sure you're giving your employees, what they need, wage and culture wise, before they get that foot out the door.
yeah, well, and the real question on that response is, why aren't they out the door yet? So is this an issue where the employer has somebody that they actually don't want to retain, and so they haven't given them the raise that they maybe should have gotten, and so they're hoping that they leave, but they haven't left? And I think you see this sometimes, and one of the biggest issues with these situations is they're most likely doing damage in the organization, both from a quality of work, from an attitude perspective. you know, all sorts of things that if you are allowed to stick around, I think sometimes organizations don't realize the damage that's being done. So
I want to jump in.
Go ahead, yeah, shoot.
I agree with what Dan said. This guy, whoever this is, they're looking for a reason to leave, and I'm gonna give them one. You know, from a manager standpoint, if I'm going to evaluate you and what you can control, attitude, effort, and skill, and I personally believe attitude is the most important. You know, there's studies that suggest that that person's got a negative attitude. It financially, it's better that you send that person home with pay and let the rest of that group do their job. It's more cost effective to send them home with pay than it is to leave them there. And so I kind of agree with what Dan said at the beginning, that some of these have conversation with this guy. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but we've all been there personally as well. That you got to make a decision. And I know we don't use the employee part of the survey, but you got to make a decision. Do you want to be here? Is if you do, you know, I need to help grow you a little bit, because right now you're not. I get defensive on that. I know you can, when you get a bad attitude, I know what that does to you. This guy's had a bad attitude for a while, and he's looking for a reason to leave, in my personal opinion. That's why I don't work in HR. That's why I don't work in HR, Ryan. They wouldn't let me.
Love it. All right, let's do one more customer and maybe one more employee, and then I think that we're probably about ready to move on to Q&A and let the audience ask some questions if they have any. So as you're going through this session, if you have any questions or thoughts, go ahead and throw those into Q&A, and we can ask the audience. All right, so this one is, I felt there was this is a voice of customer response. I felt there was inadequate communication, usually no personal answer to repeated phone calls, had to leave a message, then no return calls. Finally, I went to the shop to get an answer on when it would be ready, and at that time they were finishing up and it was promptly delivered. Has anybody seen a customer complaining about lack of communication about their equipment being completed? So obviously, you know, kind of things fall through the crack. We're all going to have situations like this. Give me an idea of how specifically you might handle this, and then any ideas as far as things you're doing in your organizations to try to solve this problem of maybe not picking up the phone fast enough or not communicating fast enough. Audrey, you're doing a lot of head bobbing. You want to start?
Yeah, I think one thing that we have noticed as a trend on our customer surveys is communication. I would love to hear from anyone that has a fail-proof way for communication, because you can give the tools to the employees, whether it's just a company cell phone with text messaging, whether it's Connect or Modern or any of those texting softwares where there's just a gap in communication overall. And some locations are better than others, as we see with everything. So like you go over to White Star here in Wichita, our service manager, you can't have a conversation with him because he's either talking to the customers that are right there, or he's on his phone texting updates, getting updates, or on the call. So I say that because he's here in Wichita. It's easy for me to jump over and see it. But communication is key. So it's something that with the new ERP system, we're really hopeful that we can improve upon that. But these are ones where we would definitely be passing it on, and either the service manager would get copied in by the branch manager. They'll forward it on and say, hey, what happened here? And they'll say, oh, we tried to call, we had the wrong phone number, or we tried to call, he never answered, or oops, it slipped through. We did need to do better. So we've seen it from all sides where it's, and again, the service manager taking what they say with a grain of salt. Sometimes they say they called 30 times and maybe they didn't. That's a whole nother problem that would need to be addressed. But communication is definitely something that I think it's not just for our industry, but anything that you want that. So we have to strive to improve that for our employees, to find the method that they're comfortable with. As the new generation's coming through, it's all texting. If my dad were to bring his tractor in, he wants a phone call. He doesn't like to text. He'll get frustrated and slam the phone down. So you have to know the audience, figure out the communication, just like the employee communication earlier. and make sure you're just delivering it as best you can to keep the customers updated, because nobody wants to be ignored.
Thanks, Audra.
Ryan, you like Audra said earlier, you talked about the employee communication versus 25 years ago. There's so many different ways to communicate with people today. You need to ask the person the question, how do you like to be communicated with? Number one. So if you're a parts person, how do you want me to get back to you on this parts order? You want me to text you? You want me to call you? You want me to email you? You want me to do multiples? I mean, all of our employees have access to all of these various forms of communication. Do it and then follow up on it. Don't assume that the customer, uh, because they are under the age of 40, only wants to be texted to. Ask them the question. Maybe they do want a phone call. Don't assume how the customer wants to be communicated with. And it's amazing what happens when you ask questions. I think too many times we either A, don't ask the questions because we're scared to ask them, because the customer might come back and yell at me, or I don't want to look stupid by asking questions. Well, if you don't ask the question, you're never going to get to the root solution.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll talk a little bit later about kind of taking satisfaction to the next level. You know, when we kind of did that class before, we talked about create a persona and group your customers into the persona. This customer is this type of persona, and this customer is this type of persona. And the reality is now we have our tools that we don't need to use a persona. We need to understand, what does that person want and how do they want to be treated? And we need to understand, like, we have the CRM solutions and we have these knowledge bases, and we should understand for that customer, to your point, do they want to be texted? Do they want to be emailed? Do they want to be emailed and texted, right? How do they want to be handled? And so the more that the world starts focusing on hyper personalization and making sure we deeply understand that individual customer and not the segment of that customer buckets into, the better we're all going to do. So I love it. Paul, did you want to jump in on that too?
I think, yeah, I'm on board with that 100%. Hudson is really pursuing some type of automated text, whether it's through the CRM or through a company, a third-party company. That's our number one. When you look at all of the surveys that we get across all of our locations in services, that we can do better is updating on my quote or changes in my quote. We're just awful at it. And I shouldn't say it that way. That's our biggest opportunity to change on that. And we also recognize too that that's our busiest department, and that's probably our most stressful position as the service manager. And it's also this position that we turn the most, that they've got the shortest life expectancy. So it's a really hot button for us in terms of taking care of the customer, but it's also a hot button in terms of, dang, service manager is ready to jump off the building because he wants to call, wants to follow up, but he can't. And what we're trying to figure out is what Dan said. What's the best way to do that? I think that from Dan's comment about just asking the question of how do you want us to, it's pretty basic, but we probably have missed that it's just going to have to be part of that customer service training. Just ask, and we'll do our best to do that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask one last question on the employee side, and I think it's pretty general. One of the things that we saw in some of our research was employees that have an understanding of a career path and a plan tend to be a lot happier in the organization. And there was this comment on the employee side that said, provide opportunities for career advancement or different career paths, provide resources to decrease work stress, continue to push for hiring employees to fill roles and creating new positions so I can focus on my role. What caught me about that comment was this concept of provide opportunities for career advancement or different career paths. And I guess what I'd like to get some feedback from the group is there anything unique that you'd share with the audience from working with staff to give them some insights into their career path in the organization, and whether it's a definition of a path or training opportunities, or what is it that you're doing that you can help the audience think about they can do in their own organizations? Paul, you got anything you want to start there?
One of the guys that I hired on my team, previous position, I hired him without any experience. And so he was brand new to the company, brand new to the industry. And I can remember asking, brand new to Hudson, what do you want to do? And I think the point that I would make on that is that I'm pretty intentional about having conversations with my guys about, okay, I understand that where you're serving now. I understand what your role is. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And again, to build off what Dan said a while ago about asking the question, how do you want to be contacted? Like, you got to be really intentional. I have to be very intentional with my team about saying, okay, you're really good at what it is that you're doing, and it makes my job easier if I think that you're going to be here for the next 10 years in this same role, but that's not realistic. Where do you want to go? Career path for it's important, but it's assumed, and we take it for granted. And so for me, for my guys, is that it's got to be an intentional conversation, and the performance appraisal and all that goes with that. I think that gets lost. I think that for my team, they recognize that I'm going to ask them, so they come tell me. I'm like, please don't tell me you want to be president of the company. No, you can't go back. Allowing them to create that atmosphere. Okay, this is what I want. And then I've got to be honest and say, you know what? I think I can get you there. Or no, you are drinking Drano. You can't do that.
Well, and I think, thanks for sharing that. I remember our panel discussion with Josh Wagoner, your CEO, and talking about how I think he started as a welder and kind of worked his way up through the ranks and has had discussions with staff, letting them know, hey, listen, you can do anything you want. If you want my job, then tell me you want my job, and let's start talking about what a path looks like, so that one day you have an opportunity to do it. And so I was kind of inspired by that messaging that, listen, you just have to be able to own it. And I think one of the other things that he shared was just the concept of giving people an opportunity to see what that job's really like before you send them down that training path. Because sometimes the allure of that job, salesperson's job of being able to have a little bit more of a flexible schedule and kind of be out and about, but the unsure nature of the compensation sometimes can kind of get people maybe to rethink that career path that is maybe not in alignment with their personality type. So thank you for sharing that. Dan and Audra, anything to add to that? All right. So the one thing that I would say here is, as we wind this session down, and we got 7 minutes, I think, until the next one. Thanks so much for all of you responding and the questions. I know I kind of put you in the hot seat and made you answer questions without knowing exactly what the answer is. And so I really appreciate that.